Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 304, cover dated September 1993. So the very first issue of X-Men was cover dated September 1963. So this really is the 30th anniversary issue of the title. And it is part of the Fatal Attractions kind of loose crossover in some books. The first chapter of which was X Factor 92, but this really is the meat of it. It is the return of the X-Men's oldest and greatest foe. And so the cover caption here is Fatal Attractions, an offer of salvation, a betrayal most bitter. And I think you can see quite well there on camera the hologram sticker. And this one is designed by Greg Capullo, and I think it looks pretty cool. And so obviously you have a collection of the X-Men here, blue and gold teams facing off against someone. Who could it be? Also Madrox the Multiple Man is here. Who could it be? Well, if I open it up, because this is a double cover, you should be able to see here it's Magneto. So this is a kind of homage to the very first issue of the title. When of course the original 5 X-Men were facing off against Magneto, who was on the left hand side of that original cover. So we've got an array of X-Men, X-Factor, X-Force here on this cover, most of whom appear in the interior story, but I really like this drawing of Magneto here. He looks particularly regal and magnificent. The art is of course by John Romita Jr., and the inker here is Dan Panosian. So I'll just kind of move this around so that you can see that hologram there in action. Yeah. And now we'll open this one up to the splash page. And we have the story begin in medias res. That is in the middle of things. And we have the acolytes attacking Fabian Cortez. So what is going on? Well, the acolytes, oh, by the way, the establishing shot here is of the Soviet nuclear submarine, the Leningrad, which Magneto sunk back in Uncanny X-Men 150, and which was also referenced in Adjectiveless X-Men number 1 when Magneto raised it again in order to get at its cargo of nuclear missiles. And this is where the acolytes have been based and teleporting in and out using Amelia Vaught's powers. So, as I said, they've just discovered that Fabian Cortez was Magneto's murderer, but also that Magneto is not dead, but alive. So they feel betrayed and they're attacking him. And who has revealed it to them that he is the one who attempted to murder Magneto? It's this new character, Exodus. So Exodus is designed by Joe Quesada and made his first appearance in X Factor 92, drawn by Joe Quesada and co-plotted by Quesada. So this is Quesada's design costume. And Exodus explains that he is the voice of Magneto. So he's a kind of like a harbinger figure for Magneto. And he says, "I am Exodus, so named by Magnus himself. For I am the guide by which mutants will rise from the genetic quagmire that is humanity. I offer sojourn unto paradise for all those who are faithful in thought and deed to Magneto's cause. While it was not my intent to ruin your subterfuge per se," he says to Cortez, "I regret it was necessary in order that I make my own intentions clear." So throughout this issue we have further development of this reconfiguration of Magneto as a messiah type figure for certain cohorts of mutants, the acolytes of course in particular. And here is Vought attacking Cortez, and then Exodus informing the acolytes to prepare themselves for ascension. And that's an evocative term because it was one that was used by the Dark Riders recently in X-Men number 23, because they're very interested in the coming ascension of the High Lords. And these High Lords of course will be, or the implication is they might be the most powerful mutants, yes? And we're going to see a pair of very powerful mutants duke it out, so to speak, in this issue. So Cortez really isn't pleased at all. He's wasted months of his life manipulating those sheep, and Exodus blasts him with his power. He says, "Just so we're clear, when we meet again in the future, if it were up to me, I would hurl you into oblivion like the insignificant flea that you are. As it is, Magnus has decided you should suffer slowly, a victim of someone else's legacy." And of course, the legacy virus is rife in the world. It is Strife's bitter gift to mutant kind, and it has taken the life most recently of Illyana Rasputin, that is Colossus's baby sister. And here we see Professor X. Wonderful panel here by John Romita Jr., inked by Dan Green. I love the rendering of the material of Professor X's wash towel here. Really nicely done with a brush by Dan Green. And this is hard to pull off, getting the angles right here for this to be the reflection of this angled face, like a 3/4, less than 3/4, or actually maybe more, what should I say, more acute than 3/4 profile from behind of Professor X looking at himself in the mirror. And you can see his red lined eyes there as well, and just the weariness on his face, because he's seeing a face in the mirror marred by failure. And so John Romita Jr. very much in love with these double page layouts that you have to turn vertical in order to read. I'm not sure that I'm so much in love with them, certainly for making these videos, but you can see a nicely designed bathroom there that Professor X is washing up in. He's in his wheelchair, he's in his vest, and who appears except for his intergalactic lover, and that is Lilandra, the magistrix of the empress and magistrix of the Shi'ar Empire. And she's there because, as she says, Professor X's pain, devastation has reached across the galaxy to embrace her soul in a grip of ice. So she's come to comfort him on the death of Illyana. And so Professor X explains to her, I love the coloring here on this page as well, the yellow and purple, they work really well. Really nice colors on this page. And this is not Glynis Oliver. So after this scene, I'm going to go to the credits, which are at the very end of the issue, just to discuss them. But so far what we're looking at is art by John Romita Jr. and inked by Dan Green. So Lilandra is, it's a holographic display, and she says, "While I do not know the specifics of what happened with Illyana, I do know you could not possibly have failed her here in your heart. I know Charles Francis Xavier well enough to know that you did everything you could, and in the end, that is all any one of us can ever do," she says. And then the technicians can't maintain the transmission because she is transmitting from galaxies away. But she says to him as she loses contact, "Wanted you to know that whatever you're experiencing, you're not going through it alone." So that's a nice touch there by Lobdell to have, because Scott Lobdell is the writer here, to have Lilandra contact Charles in his moment of feeling a failure. And here we are in his bedroom, and he's got quite a high-tech desk here, and he accesses something called the Magneto protocols. So he's speaking out loud here, and he's saying that he always will be alone. Even those whom I ally myself with, both human and mutant, often do so from a distance. My mutant underground consists of people who understand there are dangers which transcend racial boundaries. People who depend on me not to allow this inevitable confrontation to end like every other. People who I will not fail. And that's quite the look of determination on his face. So as I said, we're at the end of that scene, and I'm going to flip to the end here, and I'll just cover that, where we have the credits. So the title of the story is For What I've Done, and the writer is Scott Lobdell. John Romita Jr. is the main artist, but there is also a team of helper artists. So we've got Jay Lee, Chris Sprouse, Brandon Peterson, and Paul Smith. The inkers are Dan Green is the main inker on Romita Jr., but also Dan Panosian, Terry Austin, Tom Palmer, and Keith Williams. The colorist is Mike Thomas, and the letterer Chris Eliopoulos. Okay, so I'll return to this later, but let's go back to where I left off with the review. Okay, so then our scene switches to from the mansion to space. And who is up in space except for this figure with his purple cloak and white hair looking at the earth? And this is what he says: "My apologies, children, for I'm afraid I cannot save you all. In my youth, I believed I could rescue each of you from the arrogance, the ignorance, the sheer cruelty that others call humanity. I was convinced that physical strength, moral courage would be enough. I was wrong. I realize now that the Earth, for the moment, is doomed, and that if mutants are to survive as they must, then our future lies here, among the stars, here, where we might lay claim to our own corner of heaven, here in Avalon." So this is our first look at Magneto's new home in space, no longer Asteroid M, but this new structure and ship, Avalon. And then we move into the narrative captions, and this is interesting, this bit here, because we're going to link to some of what Chris Claremont established regarding Magneto's past. There was a time when this man would have scoffed at the thought of talking to himself, but that too has changed. It may have changed on the night he died on a flaming asteroid as it plunged into Earth's atmosphere. That's adjectiveless X-Men number 3. When the acolyte called Chrome transmuted this man's critically wounded body into omnium, ensuring he'd survived the fiery crash to Earth. So that is how Magneto's alive and walking around. His benefactor died so that he may live, but far more likely it all changed on the night decades earlier when he lost the one great love of his life, the only thing he ever truly created in a life that has since, it seems, been about nothing more than death and destruction. So that is a reference to his daughter Anya, and that story is told by Chris Claremont in the backup story to Classic X-Men number 12, the story entitled A Fire in the Night, and you will find a review of that backup story here on the channel, so you can search that out. True, the narrative captions continue. It is destruction in the same way a blank canvas is scarred by a swath of paint, but it is destruction nonetheless. That much, at least, his need to destroy in order to create, for better or for worse, has not changed as he dons his helmet. And then we get this flashback to, this is Anya here, and this is where we learn that Magnus had a name before that, long before he'd become Magneto, master of magnetism, even before he chose the name Magnus. He was Eric Lenscher, a man not unlike any other of his time, a young victim of the concentration camp which claimed his family, Auschwitz. A bout of hepatitis delayed the manifestation of his mutant powers until well into adulthood. That's an interesting little detail there as regards why was it that Magneto's powers didn't develop when he was a teenager in Auschwitz. Powers which sprung savagely from his chest on the night a panicked crowd prevented him from rescuing his firstborn daughter. Now that contradicts what is established by Chris Claremont in A Fire in the Night, in that backup story. So this leads me to believe, as well as a few other details here, that Lobdell didn't read that story, that he is basing everything here on Claremont's own recap of Magneto's origins and backstory in Uncanny X-Men 275 in particular, that issue where he's in the Savage Land, where he's thinking back on his past, what's brought him to that moment where he's contemplating killing Zaladane, that's the only way to deal with the likes of her. So then he's here remembering his grief afterwards, how he was abandoned by his wife, and then he's caught up by humans who shoot him in the back of the head. It's an interesting 2-page spread here, an advertisement for pizza and comics by Joe Madureira. Interesting that, because very soon he would become the main artist after John Romita Jr. on Uncanny X-Men. So these pages, by the way, I should mention this, of course, is Jay Lee. So we're getting a few pages by Jay Lee here. And if we go to the narrative caption, this is what we learned. The soldiers had been searching for him since the previous dawn, shortly after they'd come across the remains of a small village some 60 kilometers to the east, a town reduced to a mass grave by the single mournful cry of a man who was once a father, a man who was once a man. They were convinced they could ambush him, bring him down, bring him to justice, their justice, human justice. They were fools. So Magneto's not being taken out by the bullet, and the men say, by the power invested in us, by the authority of God and man, said the soldier, we are arresting you for atrocities against humanity. Now this boldly contradicts Chris Claremont's A Fire in the Night, because Magneto's memories there are, he was in Ukraine, he was in Soviet Ukraine, and any men that would come after him would be coming after him on the authority of the Soviet state and not of God, because of course the USSR was a godless state, one in which there was no place for God. So this is plainly contradicting Claremont's backstory in Classic X-Men number 12, and that's what makes me think Lobdell hadn't read it. But again, this falls on the editor. This is Bob Harris's job to spot this and get this rewritten in order to make it consistent with established continuity. So then we see Magneto turn on these men who were hunting him. Great splash page here by Jay Lee. So this is Jay Lee inking himself, and this is his work just before he heads to Image. Wonderful work here. You can see the way that he's scratching the ink from the page and also adding in white media as well. You can see it especially here too. And so Magneto, we learn here, in that moment when he uses his power to have this soldier shoot his compatriots, the moment he used his power to force one soldier to slay his comrades, the world lost one of its most valuable resources. It lost the heart and soul of Eric Lensher and found in its place an entity known as Magneto. In the silence that followed, all that was left of what had gone before was the blood of strangers, the remains of a little girl, and the shadow of a man. Again, this is in contradiction to Chris Claremont's work, and in particular the backup story in Classic X-Men number 19, I, Magneto. You will find a video review of that backup story on the channel. And it is in that story that Claremont wrote the origin of Silver Age Magneto, which comes when he realizes that he is being played for a fool by the CIA, and that the CIA have their own approved Nazis. Magneto's a Nazi hunter in Argentina, and the CIA group he works for turn on him, and they murder his secretary physician, perhaps could have been girlfriend, and it sends him crazy. And also in that issue we learn that his untrained, untutored use of his power has been rewiring his brain, and that is Claremont's explanation for why Magneto was a raging, homicidal, evil mutant villain in X-Men number 1 and all throughout the Silver Age, up to Uncanny X-Men 150, when he established that Magneto had that past in Auschwitz and began to write an arc of redemption for Magneto. So here we've got another one of those double page spreads that I've got to turn around to get it on camera for you. And this is of Magneto back in the present, completing the donning of the helmet. And then we get this really cool image of him there by John Romita Jr. And this one is inked by Dan Panosian. So this is not inked by Dan Green. So infamously, this issue came out late. It was a good month or more late. And it seems to have been a little bit rushed, and people getting pages to ink, willy-nilly. And also, well, I'll save this up for a few moments from now. I'll say something about that a little bit later. But anyway, we've met Magneto here making a speech whereby in very Silver Age fashion, where he says here, whether he's addressing Professor X, whether they be the innocent like Illyana, Doug and Anya before them, the lost such as my acolytes, or the misguided like the fools you count among the X-Men, they need to be protected. They need to be awakened from the dream in which you've lulled them. Whether you admit it or not, they need Magneto. So we're going to have a conflict between Magneto and Professor X in this issue. Whoops. And here we have another scene change. We're back in the X-Mansion and we have got a change of artist. And this is a segment by Sprouse, who I don't think had done any work on the X-Men prior to this. So he was a bit of a surprise to see in here at the time. And at the time, I didn't really like his section of the issue, but I like it now in the present. And also, who's the inker here? This is Terry Austin on inks. Okay, so Sprouse and Terry Austin. So Kitty's here checking the fridge for some food. There hasn't been time to do any shopping because everything that's been going on at the mansion, in particular with Illyana's death. And then we get this little kind of heart-to-heart with Aurora and Kitty that harks back to Uncanny X-Men 180. And Kitty's pretty much thinking, she says here, it's weird up here together, just you and me again, like in 180, as if nothing's changed since I left the X-Men. But it has, Kitten, says Aurora, and therein lies the key to our survival, our very sanity. For nature has a wondrous way of changing everything about us. Mother Earth herself is in a perpetual state of motion. For every action we take, such as my manipulating the wind and storm, the bright lady can be trusted to act upon it, exerting her own will on our behalf, and we in the end must marvel at her wisdom and glory. And Kitty says, a dramatic rendition of every cloud has a silver lining. Tell me, Aurora, where's the glory in Illyana's death, or Doug's for that matter, or John Proudstar's? Sometimes a cloud is just a cloud and we suffer under its shadow. So interesting different perspectives, and somebody who's under the shadow of a deep dark cloud is Colossus, and he's burning his artwork here, his paintings. So Kitty goes down to talk to him, and she says, she says to him, she asks him what is he doing, and he says he's getting on with his life. And she responds, how? By physically destroying your past? By trying to erase that part of you that can still create his artistic side, that can capture hearts and souls on a canvas? And this is a painting of his sister, Illyana. Do you really believe that it's that easy? She asks. And he says, no, I do not believe anything is easy anymore, but if you feel that strongly about this work, take it. So she's emotional, and she asks him, what are you feeling? And he says here, and it looks like it, nothing. So she hugs him, but there's no response. And she's shocked here. This is nice storytelling by Sprouse on this page. And she runs off crying with the painting portrait of Illyana. And then we switch to this little mission church. Once it was a place where pilgrims, princes and paupers came to worship, and two governors came to wed. So this abuts the X-Men's grounds, so Professor X's domain. And they're going to have a memorial service here for Illyana. And we have this interesting encounter between Banshee and Bishop. And Bishop says to Banshee, perhaps I should tell you what little I know of your fate, how it was long rumoured amongst the halls of the XSE that you were the last hope, the custodian of the next Jenner, and he's cut off by Banshee. And perhaps I should go leap in front of a bus, Bishop, then all your little stories from the future, your best laid plans will not mean much of anything, eh? So Banshee basically says, look, he's got hope for the future. He does believe Bishop is from the future, but he hopes that it can be changed. And this is laying the groundwork for the new team, Generation X, where Banshee will be the headmaster, putting a new team of mutant teenagers through their paces in order to build that better future. And we get a great double page spread here. John Romita Jr. back again, and this one inked by Dan Green again. And Aurora gives the speech here, a memorial speech, where she says, "I choose to believe that Illyana is looking down upon this assemblage of her friends and family." And she says here, "If we take her lessons to heart, Illyana will never truly die. She will have won her battle. She will live within every one of us until we breathe our last." And Hank says, "Amen." And so we've got a mixture here of X-Men blue and gold teams. We've got X-Force back here. We've got X-Factor. But there's a few people missing. This, I think, is Stevie Hunter. There's a few people missing. We haven't got all of Excalibur there. We've got Nightcrawler and Kitty. We don't have all of X-Force there. Warpath is missing. And also missing is Rain. So that's kind of interesting. And then we get this top-down shot of the church and the driveway out to the main road. This must be Breakstone Lake here. And we have Kitty and Sam embracing. Of course, Sam was a charter member of the New Mutants. And we've got some confusion here. Well, yeah, we've got Shatterstar and Feral really don't understand what's going on here with all the emotions. They have no connection to Illyana, of course. And they also reveal by what they talk about a recent assault on Cable. That was by Magneto in X-Force 25, which Warren overhears. And he asks who exactly was responsible for this attack on X-Force's leader. And why do I get the feeling I'm not going to like the answer? Well, he's going to see him soon enough. And then Professor X grabs Colossus for a quiet word and says, "I just want you to know how terribly sorry I am." But Colossus is not having it. He says, "Why do I doubt that?" Colossus is very angry. "Is it because I have trouble believing anything you say? When you asked me to leave the Ust-Ordinsky collective, you said, and I remember the words as if you said them only yesterday, power such as yours belongs to the world, Peter, to be used for the good of all." So Scott there sees that something's brewing, tells Aurora about it. Colossus getting very angry here. He's saying that the dream failed him, failed Illyana, and he's never going to forgive the professor. So Cyclops comes along to say, "Hold on, but Professor X admits you're absolutely right. And now who's this? How fortuitous for everyone that I have chosen this moment to return." So here we have a double page spread by Brandon Peterson and inked by Dan Panosian of the arrival of Professor X, but Magneto to, in some ways, gate crash Illyana's funeral. And he basically says here he didn't die during the fall of Asteroid M. He explains how he survived. And he says, "As it is, unexpected developments necessitated I take a more active role as savior to my genetic brethren." What he's referring to there is the legacy virus. So the X-Men, predictably enough, get ready to take him on. Iceman there, Storm. And Magneto says, "I'm here because of my respect for those who have gone before me and to prevent others from sharing their fate. I'm here to offer each of you sanctuary from the coming firestorm of death that will soon rage across this planet. I've returned to offer you an alternative to the genocide of our people. I'm here to offer you salvation." And then Exodus arrives, still Brandon Peterson, but I don't think this is inked by Dan Panosian. This could be Keith Williams here on inks. And the acolytes arrive, and predictably enough, they treat Magneto as if he's God. So Senyaka here says, "Praise be to Magneto, his word is law." The X-Men are on the alert, but like Wolverine here popping his claws, and Cyclops tells him, "Stay calm, Wolverine, until we know what we're up against. You're the drop-dead last person I want slugging it out with Magneto." And we're going to see exactly why Cyclops is right about that in X-Men 25. Now we've got new art team yet again. So this is Paul Smith returning to the title, and his inker is Tom Palmer. So this is a very interesting combo here of Paul Smith and Tom Palmer. So Magneto easily deals with Wolverine, forces his claws to retract, takes apart Professor X's wheelchair, and Magneto uses his power to grip the iron fibers in everybody's blood, so they are turned pretty much into immobile statues. But Bishop here asks quietly, and if those powers are involuntary? Because Bishop's powers are to automatically absorb energy. And we're going to see how all that pans out shortly. So Senyaka here bows down before Magneto, and Pietro basically tells his father what Senyaka did and the other acolytes. A genetic cleansing of dozens of innocent people that happened in X Factor 92. Sick and dying humans. They were in a hospice who were of no threat to anyone. And these acts were committed in your name, Father. So Magneto uses his power to bind Senyaka with his own whips. And he says here, crimes, my son, is it a crime to put an animal out of its misery? What you witnessed was the tossing of the gauntlet. The first sign of mutants taking the initiative to free themselves from the human oppression at last. Had I not been in the Antarctic gathering my strength, we saw him there in silhouette in X-Men Unlimited #1, a video review of which is on the channel. Renewing myself in body and soul, I would have given my acolytes my blessing, but I did not. And while your zeal is admirable, Senyaka, order must be maintained. When the rivers of this planet roar with the blood of humans, when the earth opens to swallow whole all those who oppose me, and this will be done on my word and mine alone, the word of Magneto. So he uses his power to turn those whips against Senyaka, and Jubilee's reaction here shows what he's done. He pulped the guy with his own coils. We're talking 4-star grossness. So everybody's shocked. And Magneto says, do not weep for this pathetic man, for I've not slain him. Rather, he's been liberated from the enslavement that was his life. Trust one who has died and risen again. Death has a way of putting everything into perspective. So Magneto got a real messiah complex here, and also he's very morally compromised in terms of his point of view on the slaughter of those people in the hospice as well. So he now reveals to them why he's come. The offer of salvation, Avalon. So let's see that here. So now it comes down from orbit and hovers above the X-Men's domain. And the narrative caption says, at this moment, what has long been suspected can no longer be denied. Magneto has returned and no human being will truly feel safe again. So Professor X looks at it and is shocked. It's not a haven, it's a fortress laden down with Shi'ar weaponry he could only have appropriated during his time with the X-Men. And this goes back to issue 200, when Professor X appointed Magneto headmaster of the school in his stead, and when Magneto was the trainer of the New Mutants. Dear God in heaven, what have I done? So Magneto says, I can see now that at last you understand, don't you, Charles? You realize I'm no longer the preening, fawning man I was when my mind was first altered by your beloved Moira MacTaggart. Refers back to theories he had back in X-Men, adjectiveless X-Men 1-3. I refuse to ever again become an apologist, a nursemaid to the next generation of mutants foolish enough to opt to become your X-Men. Instead, I stand before you as the man I've always been, the future ruler of a world dominated by Homo Superior. So he offers Charles an invitation to come with him. Come with me, Charles, come with me to Avalon as we wait for the land to be purged of the plague that created by another of our kind. Come and witness from a distance the final gasping breath of humanity. It's a destiny that cannot be denied. So Exodus then, on Magneto's command, begins the ascension of the acolytes to Avalon. And he says, not long ago, Xavier, I tried your path. Now I ask you, my oldest friend, do you have the courage to do what I had done? Are you willing to walk down my path for a time? And of course we know that Professor X is not going to be on board with anything like that. And we're back to John Romita Jr.'s pencils and Dan Green on inks here. So Professor X basically hits Magneto with what a lot of readers might be thinking at this point. Do you truly believe you're attempting anything original, Magnus? Misspelling there. Don't you realize there is little difference between you and the same monster responsible for the death of your parents and sister? That's Hitler. Can't you see you've become what you hated most in others? So Magneto's not having the comparison. Don't you compare me to any human, Charles. I seek to rescue our people, and if others must suffer because of that, I'm not responsible. Now, Bishop is building up energy here. He says, I automatically absorb any energy directed at me, channeling it through me, any energy, including apparently Magneto's. So Magneto's getting ready to head up to Avalon, and he says here, unless we as a race take action this moment, Illyana will be but the first of scores of innocent victims to die. And look who's listening. It's Colossus. And then the energy blows from Bishop. This is a great double page spread here. And we're said, like it takes Magneto almost by surprise. He just cottons onto it an instant before it happens. But Bishop's blast knocks him right into the mission church. And then the X-Men are freed of his hold. So Cyclops here, the strategist, starts pounding Bishop with his optic blasts in order to charge him up so that he can take out Magneto again. So here's Magneto. Of course, he emerges from the wreckage of the church and he is fighting mad. This is how you repay the courtesy I've extended to you. Great anchor image of him here. But I will quibble somewhat with just one aspect of John Romita Jr.'s anatomy here. Look at the abs. There's like, what's this? 12 abdominal muscles here. I'm not sure that that's anatomically correct. Everything else about the image though is really great. So the X-Men here, everybody charging up Bishop. Avalon here hovering over. The danger is immediate. And then of course Rogue. So Rogue and Magneto had that relationship in the Savage Land. And she says, Magneto, listen to yourself. And this is interesting because this parallels a moment when she went after Magneto as well to have a one-to-one chat with him in Adjectiveless X-Men #1. And she says, Strife was a mutant same as us. You can't blame humanity for his disease. And that is another point that the engaged and attentive reader must have been thinking at the time. So Magneto's a little unhinged, to say the least, in this issue. So she does what she does to absorb his powers and render him unconscious by kissing him. But it doesn't 100% work. And so she asks here, what happened? I was supposed to absorb your power. And he explains, you did after a fashion. You actually managed to steal a bit. The difference being it was not enough. As the lingering memories that float unbidden through your mind, at least for the moment, should reveal to you, I'm no longer the man I was. I'm stronger than I've ever been, ever have imagined I would one day become. Steal half my power and I still have more than enough to eliminate anyone who seeks to stop me from doing what I must to save my people, he says. So then he flings Rogue at the Beast and Gambit, who catch her, and he says here, unsentimentally, but thank you for the kiss nonetheless. It served as the briefest, the sweetest reminder of what might have been, what may yet be, if any of you would all accept the truth. So then he binds them with the railing from the church. And then Bishop attacks. This is great art here by Romita Jr. and Dan Green. Look at this for an anchor image as he just pours on the energy. He says, Bishop says, and at the heart of that truth lies a bitter irony. For you and Professor Xavier, and by extension all who wear the colours of the X-Men, are all fighting for the same cause. It is only the methods we've chosen to adopt, it appears, that will separate us from your acolytes forever. And of course, Bishop from a hard future. So interesting here, you know, like he's not persuaded by Magneto's rhetoric. He is absolutely going to stick with Professor X and try and work for the undoing of the harsh future that he came from. So now everyone pours on the power against Magneto here. They're acting in unison as a team. And Storm and Jean are trying to keep Avalon aloft using their powers, Jean's TK and Storm's power over the elements. And Bishop there just absolutely blasting Magneto. Here comes Colossus coming to aid Bishop. By the way, this is Dan Panosian inking John Romita Jr. on this page. No. So he whacks Bishop from behind. Great anchor image here by Romita Jr. and Dan Panosian on inks. And he picks up Magneto and he says, what I'm saying, Magneto, is if that you will have me, I would like to join you in your chosen plight. There is nothing left for me here. And Magneto responds, there's nothing left here for any of us. Welcome to the fold, Peter. Welcome to the future. So Kitty, of course, shocked. Wolverine here, I like what he says here. Tell me somebody's controlling his mind. Well, it will turn out when Colossus returns to the side of the angels, the explanation will be that he's brain damaged when he's making this decision, but that's in the future. So he takes off with the acolytes, and Professor X realizes here he's got to do something. Turn the page, and he says here, for all your talk of ruling the world, you've lost sight of the reality that is the world that has always ruled you. In your youth, it took away the family in which you were born. As a man, it robbed you of the family you created. You could have been a force for good in this world. And as your friend, maybe the only friend you've ever allowed inside your heart, I can attest to the inherent goodness of the man you once were. But you lacked courage, Eric, the fortitude to rise above the challenges life set you. Instead, you became the angry, bitter man I see before you. So here, Professor X is using his powers to the maximum, and he continues by arguing with Magneto, saying, do you remember what happened then, Eric? Do you recall how one of us kept the he says here, for you and I both started at the same point in our lives. Both believed we could make a difference in the lives of those around us. See Uncanny X-Men 161 for more on that. Do you remember what happened then, Eric? Do you recall how one of us kept the promise we'd made to the other? The promise that our dream would survive? We've got to turn it over. This is a great page. Great layouts here by Romita Jr., inked by Panosian. Only one of us was true to our word, says Professor X. He says he had to believe in Magneto in order that I could believe in the dream to which we dedicated our lives. Magneto here says, but he looks like he's listening. He says, then you've wasted your time, Charles. For the man who made that promise, the man who shared your hopes of a better world, hasn't existed in years, if he ever existed at all. But Professor X refuses to accept it. He says, if you will not take responsibility for yourself, Magneto, then God help me, I will. And here we learn that he uses his power, his telepathic power, to take over Magneto's magnetic powers, and sends Magneto up into Avalon and hurls Avalon into space. But lacking the courage, the resolve to take the life of the man who he knows will certainly return and once more threaten the entire world. And then he falls back to Earth, but is caught, of course, by Archangel. I'm here, Charles, says Warren. Of course you are, Warren, says Professor X as they alight on the ground. Romita Jr. here, and could be Dan Green, could be Keith Williams doing the inking here at the end. And Professor X concludes, I'd expect nothing less from any of my X-Men, but one of them gave him less, and that's Colossus, who's gone with Magneto. So there you have it, the 30th anniversary issue for What I Have Done by Lobdell, Romita Jr., Dan Green, and others. And there's also here a little column by Stan Lee reminiscing on the X-Men and where they've come. I like this little note here as well. On this, our 30th anniversary, we'd like to especially thank the following very talented gentlemen: Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Len Wein, Dave Cockrum, John Byrne, and Chris Claremont. And those were the men, the creators, who built the X-Men into what they are and remain. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on this 30th anniversary issue, 30 years of the X-Men. Magneto's back in Silver Age form. Magneto is one of my favorite characters, probably my favorite character from the X-Men mythos. But the Magneto that is my favorite is the one written by Chris Claremont, and in particular Magneto from issue 150 of Uncanny X-Men up to issue 3 of Adjectiveless X-Men, including those backup stories in Classic X-Men. That's the Magneto that is my favorite character. And this version of the character reverting to that Silver Age characterization, not my favorite, I will say. And what I was going to say at one point in the review was that Lobdell was asked to rewrite the issue in order to make Magneto much more of a villain, more obviously a villain. So that he was ordered to do that by Bob Harris. So what we're getting here is a Magneto that is very much the character that Claremont wanted to get away from and did so much work to develop and round out the character. And so in some sense, this return of Magneto is not the return of Chris Claremont's Magneto. And there are those plain contradictions in terms of what Claremont established about Magneto's past history in Classic X-Men 12 and 19 that just aren't properly addressed or integrated into what Lobdell writes in this issue. But I lay the blame for that at the feet of Bob Harris. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review of this extra-sized anniversary issue of Uncanny X-Men number 304. If you did, please like the video in YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.